people in our society are religious more than at any previous time in our 200. That trend is 75% of all children in America are growing up outside of church. Every survey they shows fewer and fewer people with basic knowledge. 23 the view attendance in America 33 years in a row. They say every Sunday 53,000 church will not go back again. The state of Michigan has the people who are very religious, and the identify non-religious. On the opposite end is Vermont. Only 22% religious, and 58% of the residents say they are non-religious. Oklahoma is number 10 in terms of being a pretty religious. And 32% of Americans have been in our country. So what's going on? What's happening? The impact is this generation. Well, today we are of a 10-part series we're calling Behind the Music. Religious people in our country have heard over and over and over, and we're talking about lyrics. What does the Bible have to say about the messages of these? Well, the song Losing R-E-M. Now, all of our other songs, Beatles, all of whom the song Losing kind of a one-hit wonder. Outside of devoted fans, people probably couldn't name another name of another song. But Losing My Religion was recorded in October, string at the Symphony Orchestra. A little 90, it immediately caught on. It was now several, and it captured the mood. Been by Catholic priests and so forth. And you add that to the already wave of New Age, philosophy and the age of relativism. And that's a great idea. Let's just lose this whole concept of religion altogether, and things would be better. Religion is ceremonies and rules used to worship a God. Karl Marx once famously said, religion is the opium of the masses. Now, back then, opium was not a recreational drug, but a painkiller. Marx was contending oppressed people of the world would, kind of ease the pain of their suffering. However, he also reduces he also says it demand for justice right. Hey, I'm at least just right now. So in a way, his belief was that religion helps keep the poor powerless in their place, the rich to secure their hold on wealth and influence. In other words, to him, religion is sociological self-delusion. Now, Sigmund Freud saw it differently. He believed it is psychological. And I think the original Godfather movie has the perfect. The movie ends with the family, the mob family, the head people going to church. While they're in church, they're to kill, right? So, in other words, in real life, you can go out sorts of terrible, sinful things. Come Sunday, you go to church for an hour. That makes you a good person. And this is sort of how Sigmund Freud described how most religious people, in his opinion, behave badly always. Church on Sunday, ceremonies and disciplines, and everything's fine. You're going to heaven. He called it logical. He thought, well, interesting, Jesus had virtually the criticism of the religious people of his day, the Pharisees. They used their beliefs to exercise power over the poor, and people used their religion to influence ungodly behavior. And this whole dynamic is featured in a story or a parable Jesus tells in Luke chapter 18. It goes, to some who were confident their own righteousness and looked down on everyone else, Jesus told this parable. He went up to the temple, tax collector. Now, in order for us to gain the fullest meaning from this parable, I want to take the ground to the character. First, some of what's a Pharisee? Well, as far as we know, into existence about to the Jewish religion, sacrificing with other people. The Jewish feasts and religious traditions weren't always being observed. And so the Pharisees were a group of men. It was all men. No get back to living holy lives and keeping law. Most of the people weren't in. Really stood out. In fact, the word Pharisee means separated ones. Separate themselves from the other Jewish people who they were not taking their religion as they should. And so they kind of, the strict to the traditions and the ceremonies of the Jewish religion. But the strength of the Pharisees kind of eventually turned on them and became their downfall. They were so intense about a strict right. And so we're could explain more meticulously than all the other Jews did. Here in Luke chapter points out two faults, major faults that the Pharisees had, leaders of the day, for their hypocrisy, for their spiritual pride, for their desire or belief that they could merit salvation by good deeds. And he condemned them for their lack of love for other people. Well, the second in this parable, Jesus collectors. Christ, the Roman world, including Israel. And in order to collect taxes from all the Jewish cities and villages, the Romans would hire certain Jews to do their work for them. So the way it worked is the Romans required, but anything over that, they could keep. And right? If the tax collector charged people, they had the right of backing them up. So they had to do it. Now, the Jews were already an oppressed and poor people. And then to have fellow overtaxing them and becoming wealthy off of them, that was pretty to put up with. And these tax collectors were actually considered traitors. They were hated. They were despised. They would sit in the marketplace or at intersections of roads, and they would charge people for that. Or if you were pushing a car, they would tax you for it. Tax collectors were identified with money was not admissible, considered so unethical and so. And of course, it was a total disgrace if a member of the family one of these tax collectors. The Jewish rabbis in that time taught there was one who could never be forgiven. Those were tax collectors. So with a very large group of people gathered around him, Jesus said, the other day when I was at the temple, I happened to overhear. He said, first was a very religious man, a Pharisee, who stood up and prayed about himself. God, I thank you that I am not like all other robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even like a tax collector. I fast twice a week and give it. That's his prayer. Now, I don't know for sure what was going on inside this man's heart to have him say a prayer like this, but he basically says, prayer, God, I thank you that I am better than everybody else. All these evil people, these robbers and, evil doers. You might think, well, what's so wrong with thanking God for the progress you've made in your spiritual life? Maybe you're different now than you were 5 years ago. Well, I think there's of achievement than anything else. It's like, God, I thank you that I've come so far in my religious devotion. Less spiritual people. I've managed to change my life, unlike all these other, pagan, less spiritual people than me. There's kind of a tone of achievement as opposed to a tone of gratitude. It wasn't, oh Lord, if it wasn't for you and forgiveness, where would my life be? We don't see that. It was more of a self-righteous, these things that he has reframing from. He's saying, I do all these things that other people do, and I don't do all these bad things that other people do. It seems like he's just looking at externals. Aren't I something? Thief or some really bad person, but what he doesn't get into it is. And he only refers to outward life. And he's so proud of himself for all the good things he does and all the bad things that he avoids. He's also very pleased with himself because he has committed himself to doing, and that is going above and beyond the call of duty in a display of his religious deeds. He says, wait, that was required by the Jewish law. But he just wanted to know, hey, I fast twice a week. I give 10% of all I make. So what do you think of that? He seems to be a devout religious man, worthy of everyone's honor and respect. It is of his view of God, his view of himself, view of other people. What does this reveal about his? It seems like to me that this Pharisee drastically underestimated God's ability to see below the surface and see the true condition of a person's heart. He mistakenly has all these externals in order. Well, then he's in good standing with God. And he vastly underestimates God's ability to see through that and to see matters of the heart. He thinks he's pulling the wool over God's eyes, in other words. It's also apparent that he misunderstood what would impress God, which is not self-righteousness. It's not but actually just the opposite. What impresses God, humility. He wrongly thinks that he's going to go to heaven by reiterating all of these wonderful things, all these bad things he has avoided, and he's just sure that that kind of life will guarantee him a home in heaven someday. The Pharisee's prayer also revealed a lot about how he viewed himself. Here was a man who was tragically self-deceived about his own level and moral goodness. He saw himself as an exceptionally devout, righteous person, very religious. And his view of others? Well, this prayer reveals an attitude of condescension, condemnation, even contempt for those he considered religious than him, which would be everybody. Other Pharisees would be less religious than him. He glared at this tax collector, shakes his head and said, like, what a lowlife. What a loser. What is a worthless sinner like that even in the temple? It's interesting, I think, how you can tell a lot about this guy, this Pharisee, simply by how he prays. And then you flip it around and look at the prayer of the other guy, the tax collector. Jesus said, but the tax collector stood at a distance. He would not even look to heaven, but beat on his breast, God have mercy on me. The difference between the prayer of the Pharisee and the prayer of the tax collector. And the difference is in the attitude of their hearts. The Pharisee is proud, condescending, hypocritical. The tax collector was humble. He knew enough to know that, which means God knows everything. Even he doesn't his breast. In fact, if you go to the Wailing, you'll see people. I think it's quite a collector is not just like to play church. He's not just going through like a routine religious ceremony here. This is very real to him. Genuine. He knows he's a sinner. Everybody around him has done a lot of bad things in his life. He needs God's help, mercy. God valued him to be willing to forgive him. Some people have to paint this tax collector as sort of a worm-like creature who is not the case. Is not the same as to be self. It's just that the text had a very clear picture. Perfect, holy, impure, imperfect, valued himself enough and believed that God valued him enough that he would grant him mercy and forgiveness if he asked. And in verse, this man, referring to the tax collector, rather than home, you've probably heard the word justified before. What does that mean? The word means to be free of all charges against you, to be cleared of guilt. You've been justified. Like that, it means just as he. Well, this is sort of the Pharisee, such a spiritual giant, goes home condemned, and the wicked, despised tax collector justified. We're taking quite a bit of time here to look at detail. This parable being tonight, especially in light of our song of the day, losing my religion. When you look at the person, the Pharisee, who that would be the tax collector, was 17 years old in October of 1970. And I ago, and this new heart, I love God. I'm like, I'm on fire for God, right? I would go to church and I'd look around at all these people. They're all dressed up like people back then. It's like, they're just all, they don't mean it. They're just going through the motions, you know. They're a bunch of hypocrites. Obviously, I am the only Christian today. I didn't say that out loud. So here, so quickly adopted attitude as the self-righteous Pharisees. That can happen. We come to God humbly saying, Lord, you know, have mercy on me, a sinner. A few months or a few years later, we're thinking everyone else. And unfortunately, of Jesus, you know, people maybe they started out well, they had really good intentions. Time finders, righteous, and judgmental, and condescending to those who are not just as they feel like they are. That's what is at the heart of many people leaving the church and not believing in God. It's not the only, but it's a big part of it. You know, they don't want to be a part of people who and judge. In fact, in our country, Christians tend to say, well, the problem in our society is all these secular, non-religious people. They're of our nation. Secular, non in our country is what these bigots causing all the problems in our country. So today are losing their religion in our culture. The statistics, the no prayer in school, right? Got to take God out of the school. Education. The word secular means it's not like atheism. Atheism is a God. Secular about it, as if there is no God, and that's what has become. There is some that's attacking people. Mention God. Secularism, and that has taken over our society. Now, here's a question. Should people be losing their religion? Should people? The answer to me is people should be losing religion. Jump through in order to please and placate God enough entrance into heaven. The list. Not do in order to please God. And it's a burdensome list. It's a very, you never know if you've done enough, if you've performed well enough to finally get God off your back. It's kind of what religion, in case you're wondering, we're not real strong advocates of that around here. Many of us have tried that and found it. True Christianity, on the other hand, is not based on what we do for God, but it's based on what he has done. True Christianity is when a sinner, like God, and done a lot of things that are wrong, when sinners are forgiven, can be cleansed of our sin because of Jesus Christ on the cross on our behalf. And that act of ultimate love, all right, true biblical Christianity could be spelled D-O-N-E. It's about what Christ has already done for us on the cross. So yes, everybody would be wise to abandon religion and replace it with true biblical grace-based Christianity. And it's a total paradigm. It's like, you mean I don't have to spend every day for the rest of my life in a frenzied attempt to make up for all the bad things I did? I don't have to good deeds to offset all the bad deeds I've done in my life? I don't have to develop ulcers over wind up in hell someday? No, instead, rest confident in putting your hope for heaven in what Jesus has already done for you. With the band coming back up and doing the song again, and so tell the band that you can do that. And then that was the end of our service, all right?